Hey,
Hey,
Chelsea.
hey,
Can you say-
what's up? What just happened?
Well, I've learned something.
Tell me.
I'm not out of shape. I have asthma.
No way.
Yes. Um, and I'll tell you how I found out. Do you
Please.
see where we are?
It is so beautiful.
It's
I keep
really
looking at
pretty up
this.
here.
Yeah, it's so
Right.
pretty.
If you look over both of our shoulders, it is, yep, right over there.
Wow.
Those are mountains from Zion National Park.
No
And
way.
other, yeah. And then otherwise, like over to on the other side is like the Kaibab mountain range. Not
Oh.
Kaibab, I'm so sorry, Kolab, because Kaibab's different direction. But it's a very beautiful area. And this is near where my parents live in southwestern Utah. And this is also where I learned that the way I had been framing why it was hard for me to breathe was a little incorrect. My mental model wasn't accurate. And I wasn't really listening to what my body was trying to get me to see for pretty much my whole life. So I'll back up. The year was, I don't know, it was a long time ago. And it was Thanksgiving. And at this point, my mom lived in a different state. She was working in another state, and my dad and her were separated at the time, or maybe divorced. Anyway, doesn't matter. All I know is that I came down from further north where I was living in Salt Lake City to spend Thanksgiving with my sister and her husband and her two my nephews, who were only about like two at the time. And that's where I was having Thanksgiving. And then also like my dad popped by, and I think also my one of my other sister was there, and we saw my brother. Um, but where my sister lives is kind of just down the hill from this beautiful view we have. And there is a bike trail that goes up this hill to the top where we are at a park. And so I thought, hey, after dinner, you've had a big meal for Thanksgiving. We had like a lunch ish time meal. And so after that, I was like, well, definitely want to move around because you eat a lot, you want to move around. And as we established last time, for most of my life, I've been varying degrees of fat. And so at this point, I was a lot smaller fat, but I've always just been like overweight for my age ever since puberty hit. And even before that, I was just always like at in the high percentile for like height and weight, just because genetics, I was just always like a very big, broad kid. And so I was very much aware that I was larger than other people. And at the time, the way I was framing it in my brain is like, oh, it's because I'm fat. I'm fat, 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 fat. And it's a bad thing at that point. Now I can say it and I don't even care because it's like, it really just means I have a fat body and I do, but I doesn't define who I am as a person. And so at this time, though, I was largely aware of like, ugh, but my body needs to be smaller. Or at least I was very steeped in diet culture still at this time and thought it was a moral imperative to make my body smaller for the good of the world. And so I was always
Can we
conscious
take
of
a
like,
second about how absurd that is? Because it's
it's
so pervasive still. But yeah, so we can just time out and say it is wild. And we're had to work, both of us in our own ways have had to work so hard to kind of get out of that. Um, but
Yeah, it's so silly. And it is so dumb when you say it out loud and you're like, yeah, why do I think that the world needs my body to look a certain way?
I know.
No one really cares. But yeah,
No.
it's very much steeped still in the mentality of like, "Ugh, for the good of mankind, my body should be smaller."
Yeah.
And so I also, and that's kind of like, I since puberty and me being aware how much bigger I was than my peers, I was still not in a place where I thought it was because of moral failings on my end and not just yeah, this is just how your body is kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, I was very active for my whole life and I enjoyed being outside and exercising, and this was no different. So I'd eaten and I was like, well, I should exercise because also it will help burn some of these calories. But honestly, just genuinely, I like to move around. And when you see beautiful landscapes like this, you can see why I'd want to go spend some time
Yeah.
outside.
Especially like around Thanksgiving too. It would be like, I mean, is southern Utah where your parents live, is it pretty like hot during the summer? Like, do you
Yeah.
live
I mean, it's
be
it's
outside or?
the desert. It's like the Mojave Desert meets some other maybe deserty areas. But anyway, it's a desert climate.
Yeah,
So it does have quite hot. It's a dry heat, as they like to say, but it is still heat.
yeah.
And so yeah, November is when you just get really perfect hiking weather
Okay.
because it's like in the 60s and 70s. And so it's
Mhm.
just very pleasant. It's sunny, it's clear, and it's not a billion degrees, so it's really nice to be outside.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I know, I'll go for a walk and I'll take my nephews in the stroller. And like, they're twins. And so my sister had one of those side by side strollers, and they're both about two. So I don't know how, and they were both like at least average weight for a 2 year old. So I'm going to guess they were like at least 20 pounds each. Um, and this is also right now where I'm realizing I don't know what is average weights for a 2 year old. But anyway,
No,
I'm guessing
you're
around there. I'm like, now I'm saying it. I'm like, is that right? That's right, right? Because
gonna
babies are
look
born
this
and they're like
up.
8 pounds. So it makes sense that after 2 years of living, you would have gained like 12 pounds at least.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so it says that they typically weigh about 27.5 pounds.
well,
So
there you go. So at least 20 pounds was right.
yeah.
So I'm guessing that they both weighed at least 27.5 pounds each. So then when you're putting that inside a stroller, and the stroller is what, like 3 to 5 pounds, depending on the model,
Yeah,
I'm like signing up to push 55 pounds up a hill. And there's this, and the hill that's near, but that takes us up to this park where we currently are. It's a pretty steep incline because it's a bike, and it's like known in this area for being a pretty steep incline, and it's probably got one. I think I've heard people call it like like the fat man's heart attack, or like those like the nicknames that people give hills
sheesh.
that indicate that like it's strenuous to do. But it's
Yeah,
like also I should also, but this is also where I'll clarify. It's a pretty steep incline, but it's not a very huge hill. So it is a steep incline, but it's not like you're going miles and miles up. You're just going like maybe half a mile up a hill. So in my
yeah,
head, because
okay,
I've walked up this hill several times,
yeah.
again, I was just like, well, I can totally do this. But you know what I had never done was walked up a hill pushing 55 pounds in front of me.
Were
And
your calves on fire like that? I
well,
mean,
funny enough, it was like I got halfway up and I was like, oh geez, it really hurts to breathe.
oh my God.
Okay, well, I gotta keep going. My nephews are so excited. They're like, and they were happy about going up the hill. And
Yeah,
so then we had to start doing the thing where I was like pushing, and then I would like stop every, I don't know, 10, 15 feet and be like, and of course, at the time, because my moral imperative was to make my body smaller and I was failing at that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so out of shape. If I were smaller, this wouldn't be a problem. And the thing is, this is a narrative I had reproduced so many times in my life. Like, when you're in elementary school and you have to do like the presidential fitness stuff,
oh my God, yeah,
everyone, I could do everything else. I couldn't do pull-ups, but I could like do the bar hang. I could do that
yeah,
all day long. I could V-sit for miles. Like I was very flexible. I could do all the sit-ups I needed to do. I could do everything. The part that was always the hardest for me, again, I didn't do the pull-ups, but the bar hang qualified you.
yeah,
Is the running was always the worst. The mile that you had to do, and you were supposed to do like a 10-minute mile or something like that. I would try so hard to do it. And I would usually do it, but I would be like, it would be so painful by the end of it where and I even remember at the time trying to explain it to other people. I think some of my friends where I was like, I just feel like my body can do it, but my lungs don't want to. Which again,
wow.
as a kid, like now, well, as a kid, like that's it was my experience, but it's like as an adult thinking about that, if a kid said that to me, it would be like, I think I might know what's going on. But of course, none of this is registering to me because really the mental model I have that outweighs everything else, haha, outweighs pun, is that I have a large body and people in large bodies are inherently out of shape.
Um,
and physically incapable and everything like that. And so I'm cut back to, and like that was happening pretty much anytime I had to do anything that involved running or something that required a lot of like increased breathing rates for long periods of times and distances. And even as a kid, I was fully aware that I preferred things that involved shorter bursts of like sprinting or running because it was more manageable and easier for me. And, like I said before, all of this in my head meant it's just because I'm out of shape.
which is so wild too. I want to pause right there for a second too, because even like you were saying, like even now, like knowing that you have your experience and everything else, and you work with kids. So like if a kid came up to you and said, it feels like my body can, but my lungs can't, you'd be like, you need to go to a doctor. But
Yeah.
the crazy thing with the 90s and like the early 2000s is like, especially in the 90s, like everything was just so weight-based of like if you're skinny and you can do these things and you're fine. It
Yeah.
wasn't even like we're not talking about like eating disorders, we're not talking about like any sort of metabolic health or functions.
And
Um,
even like wellness, and like I put wellness in quotes because a lot of times I feel like wellness culture is often just diet culture rebranded. But
100%.
even like the wellness that isn't just rebranded diet culture, like none of that was even in the
Yeah.
air. Like that,
Yeah.
is your body even well?
Yes. Yes. And I feel like that's still as it's still like an issue too. Like, I mean, not to say that like anytime, especially kids or even as women, like it's still easy to be dismissed when you're like, something isn't up.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
something is off, something isn't feeling right. And I think that's one of the things that I love about your example, though, is that you had the language to share what your internal experience was like, even though you weren't getting the help you needed as a child.
Mhm.
The fact that you even were able to verbalize that language, like, is impressive because a lot of the people that I work with don't, and I mean, including myself, it's like we don't even have the language to describe how we're feeling internally, but like it just unlocks another level of like self-advocacy or like curiosity when you're able to verbalize what your experience is and your internal experiences and like take the time to like realize like, hey, maybe something is off. Like if you run the mile like you were doing, I don't know how many times you had to run the mile, but it was definitely, at least in the school that I went to, it was like a few times a year we had
Mhm.
to do it. So I mean, you as a kid had like all the data points around something.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like, thankfully, I've always been a pretty language abled person.
Yeah,
And so I was able to verbalize and talk about what I was experiencing. And then, of course, the issue is if you don't have anyone
yeah,
to hear or listen or do anything about it,
yeah,
kind of like saying it into a void. But at the
yeah,
time, I'm good at like, but I do remember saying out loud to some people, it's like, yeah, I feel like my body can do it. It's just that the breathing part's always what's hard for me.
yeah.
And so yeah, I was pushing my nephews. So again, it was me and my body and taking my own body up a hill. That was pretty steep.
Mhm.
And then I was pushing again at least 55 pounds ahead of me on the way up. And I'm like, really, my lungs are on fire. It's really uncomfortable. Some very nice retired aged person, so quite a bit older than me, was going up on their bike and they were walking their bike up and they were like, "Oh my goodness, this is quite the haul you have," or something like that. And I was like, you've got to really try to be cool because you don't want them to be like, oh, this poor fat woman can't do anything. And so even though my lungs were burning, I was like, oh yeah, quite a workout, huh? My nephews will love it up there, like trying so hard to be cool. And
Yeah.
I was able to keep my voice as steady as possible, telling them that. And then as soon as they left, it was like, because I didn't want to have like some sort of episode or pass out and become also like I didn't want to be a burden or a problem for them.
Yeah.
And then of course, like I'm also thinking of my little nephews that I don't want to like pass out and then they go rolling down the hill or anything like they have this like weird traumatic experience that they could only barely remember but affects them for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So I just push through it and I get to the top of the hill and like it take like I would say walking by myself up that it usually would take maybe 10-15 minutes to get up that hill by myself. With them, it probably took at least 25 minutes
Mm.
because of all the stopping I had to do just to breathe.
Mhm.
And then I get to the top, and I'm like, at this point, my lungs are fully just like fire. Now I'm surprised that smoke's not coming out when I'm breathing.
Oh.
I feel just like I can't get enough air inside of me. And again, I'm like, man, if I were in better shape, this wouldn't be a problem. So I call my sister. Like so I got my I called my sister and then I said, "Hey, I'm fine. Your boys are fine. So your boys are fine. Everyone's fine. But I'm really gonna need someone to come pick me up and take us home because I won't be able to bring your boys back down the hill. They're fine. Everyone's fine. We all made it. Everything's fine." And so my sister was like, okay. And she probably at that point was more concerned because of how much I was saying everything was fine and everything was fine. But
Yes.
I just like, and I didn't want to cause problems and I didn't want to like panic her.
Yes.
And so anyway, cut to like 10 minutes later, I'm still sitting on like my nephews are out. I've let them like out to run around. And they're in the little play area playing on the toys. I'm sitting on the like a picnic table or a bench or something nearby watching them. And I have felt like no desire to move just because physically I feel like my body just is still like trying to recover from pushing them up the hill. Like my lungs are still just like, don't do anything else. Just sit here and breathe.
Yeah.
And so my sister comes up and she's just like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine. Everyone's fine. I just like, yo, gosh, pushing him up, it was really hard. And I kind of explained it. And I was like, and even now, I'm still just trying to breathe. And she was just like, okay. And so anyway, we spend some more time up there. I recover enough to where I can like move around and walk around and get into the car and go down the hill with my sister. And again, like her house is just down the hill, but to come up to the park, she just had to like go on a road for like a mile loop. And so it still wasn't a terrible distance. And thankfully, like all of it was able to work out. But we get back to her house and we're just playing and hanging out, and we decide we should call my mom um, and just check in with her. And so we're calling my mom and talking to her. And Amy was like, yeah, Casey had some sort of like episode. And of course, I'm a little bit embarrassed too because I'm like, oh, this is so embarrassing. I thought I was in better shape. I've been working out so much. Oh, and stuff like that. And so my mom, and again, my mom's a nurse. And she did patient care for a long time. She was an RN. And she worked at the hospital for pretty much her whole career. So she's quite aware of a lot of medical conditions. And at this point, she's not doing patient care. She's like a director or something like that. She's doing some sort of admin job, but she still is a nurse and knows nursing stuff. And so I'm talking to her and she's like, what was going on? And then I explained it to her. And I told her, I was like, yeah, I was like pushing up the hill. And then all of a sudden it just got really hard to breathe and blah, blah, blah. And I explained to her all my symptoms. And she's like, Casey, that sounds like asthma. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, no, no. It was just this. It's probably because I'm out of shape. She's like, it felt like it was hard for you to get air inside your lungs. It felt like everything was really constricted and it hurt to breathe, but you needed to. It just felt like your lungs were constricting your ability to get air into them. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, Casey, that's asthma. And I was like, wait, that's asthma? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, then mom, I've had it for my whole life.
Yeah.
And she was just like, oh, we should go talk to the doctor about it. And I did. I went and talked to the doctor and I told him that the symptoms were worse, like the worst when I exercised. And he was like, okay, so probably it's exercise-induced asthma. Um, and so he gave me an inhaler that I could use, like just an albuterol inhaler that I could use. And he explained to me like how to use it before I'm going to do anything really strenuous or difficult. And that could probably help, or like break it with you because then if it becomes difficult to breathe, that could also help. And it kind of helped, but not a whole lot. So I didn't worry about it too much, and or I just felt like, okay, well, I'd already obviously learned kind of how to adapt to it throughout my life since I didn't know that that's what I had. So I'd already was kind of tuned into just like ways to manage it without an inhaler. And since I was really having a hard time getting like the rhythm of how to use the inhaler, and or it just didn't seem like that effective, I didn't really use it that much. Cut to like 2 years ago, I get sick, and it's right as a friend is visiting us. And so I'm like, I don't know why I'm sick, but I'll just wear a mask when we're in a car together and it's fine, but let's go do stuff. And I'm living in Texas at the time, and we're like spending time outside, and it's, July in Texas, so it's very humid. And I usually find it's easier to breathe in humid air. As far as like my lungs do better for longer in humid air, except for whatever reason at this point, I was like, oh gosh, don't mind me. I'm just gonna cough for like 5 minutes. It's fine. And I didn't know what was going on. So again, trying to figure out and like I have health insurance through my company, but I don't want to have to pay a deductible. It's just the whole like when you don't have the best insurance and you also don't have like a ton of money and you're trying to decide like, ugh, do I really want to spend a copay just to find out that I'm okay or whatever? Um, and so again, I called my mom, who at this point is retired from being a nurse, but is still someone that I go to just because I know she has some medical experience that I don't. And I explained to her everything, and she says, Casey, I would go get your lungs x-rayed because it sounds like you might have pneumonia. And I was like, what? No. And I went to, and I was like, well, I just don't want to, if I go to an ER though, the wait is forever. And then I have to pay like a bigger copay and all this. She's like, well, then go to like a Instacare or something like that. Like they have x-ray machines too, and they can get you like at least started. And if it needs to go to the hospital after that, they'll tell you that. And so I go and I get my lungs x-rayed, and sure enough, I have pneumonia. And anyway, cut to 3 weeks later, I still have pneumonia, even though I've been doing like the treatments that they have given me. And I wake up and half of my face is paralyzed because I woke up with Bell's palsy, which is something that can
Easy.
happen when you get really sick. And I knew what it was because I am not a nurse, but I'm a speech language pathologist, and I had worked in like some medical settings, including like rehabs and places like that, where people have also gotten Bell's palsy. So I was familiar with what it
Yeah.
was. So thankfully, because if you woke up and half of your face is paralyzed, it could be quite alarming.
Yes. I mean, were you still alarmed even though you knew what it was?
I was like, oh gosh, so this is pretty bad because it doesn't usually happen unless like your nervous system is very taxed with some
Yeah.
sort of illness. And so like I'd been doing like they'd given me one of those like uh what are they called? Like the vaporizing inhaler machines. You know what I'm
Uh,
talking about?
nebulizers?
Yep, that's what they're called. I've been doing nebulizer treatments. I've done like antibiotic rounds or whatever. And the thing with pneumonia is you have water in your lungs and infection in your lungs, and you just have to clear it out. And I'm also fully aware of this too, because again, I'm a speech language pathologist. I work with people who get aspiration pneumonia because of swallowing disorders, but I'm not sure what caused my pneumonia. And so, after I woke up with Bell's palsy, I was like, well, this is pretty bad. So I called my doctor, and I said, where I called my doctor's office, and I said, hey, I think I have pneumonia and I don't think it's getting better. And I've gone to instant care and it's not bad enough that I've needed to be hospitalized, but it is not great. And I've woken up with Bell's palsy, and they're like, well, yeah, no, come in today. And so I saw not the doctor I usually saw there, but I saw a nurse practitioner, and she was so lovely and so great. And she was listening to my lungs, and she's like, you don't have a history of asthma? And I said, well, I have like exercise asthma. And she's like, and then she kind of gave me this look, and she's like, no, honey, you have asthma, like asthma. I was like, oh. And so like talking with her kind of figured out that it was like a perfect storm of a lot of very unusual things happening all at once that triggered this episode of pneumonia that I had. I'd had pneumonia once before when I was like 15 over Christmas break, and like it was very much, and like walking pneumonia is the term they use for pneumonia where it's not bad enough that you're hospitalized, but you can still walk around, but you still have pneumonia.
Mhm.
Definitely had that when I was 15, but this was like, I guess technically walking pneumonia, but it was like a really bad case of it. It was the worst pneumonia. I've only had pneumonia twice in my life now, and it was definitely the worst pneumonia I've ever had. And it
Yeah.
was really miserable and really terrible. And after the nurse practitioner was like, no, you just have asthma. And she got me like on a regime where I could, like a medication regime, so I could start getting it all completely cleared up, which I did, thankfully. And then the Bell's palsy cleared up as well, which was great. But it definitely took some time. And so after that, though, when I went back to see her as she was monitoring my progress with clearing up my pneumonia, and she was like, well, since you have asthma and inhalers can sometimes work for people, but I would rather just make sure your lungs stay open. Here's some medication. So I got into some medication that I can take nightly. And I take it every night. And wouldn't you know it, I can breathe so much better every single day. Where again, I was like, oh, yeah, it's just asthma. Because again, my whole life, I just figured it was hard for me to breathe because I was out of shape compared to my peers. But out of shape just meant I was bigger than them. I was actually in pretty good shape. I just couldn't breathe and my body was bigger.
Yeah.
And so now it's really well managed. I've gotten the pneumonia vaccine, so I don't have to worry about getting pneumonia as much as I did before, because I don't recommend it. It's not fun. And like, thankfully, I never got COVID. But like, I've definitely stayed on top of all my COVID vaccines and my flu vaccines because now that I know that just my lungs have a harder time breathing for whatever reason because of genetics, etc. Oh yeah, that was the other thing too. After I found out after I had pneumonia, and then I was had a lot of free time that month because I was mostly just at home, like trying to breathe and cough and
Yeah.
out the lungs, the water in my lungs. So I called my parents at one point just to follow up with my mom to be like, hey, just so you know, I did go and this is what they said, etc. And then after I woke up with Bell's palsy, I called her again later and I was telling her about that and how I went to the nurse and she said that I had, or the nurse practitioner said I just had asthma. And she's like, oh, wow. And then my dad, I guess I was on speakerphone and my dad was in the background. He was like, oh, yeah, your uncles have that. And I was like, guys. And he's like, well, he said the inhale. And I was like, why would you never have told me this? Like, it's been hard for me to breathe my whole life. I tried to tell you guys this a long time ago. And he was like, well, your uncle played football and he never liked the inhaler. And I was like, ugh. Anyway, so that's it. That's how I learned I have asthma and not just exercise asthma. And thankfully, now I have medication that helps me with it. I'm aware of the condition so I can better manage it. And that does include getting vaccines that will reduce my risk for respiratory illness because now I know my lungs will just have a hard time dealing with it, regardless of what physical size I am.
Yeah, I love that. Let me recap what I heard. I heard that as a child, that's when you first started noticing that it was hard for you to breathe, especially when you were doing like more strenuous movements and exercise, because of diet culture and just kind of the, uh, how do I put this? Just the fables and myths and priorities that society was kind of like instilling on us. You just chalked it up to like, hey, I have a bigger body, and I'm just quote unquote out of shape, so it's harder for me to breathe. Then you had an experience when you were living in Salt Lake, when you went to go visit your family, and this is at a time where you had been like exercising more than normal or more than your typical average, I guess. I don't know how long you were doing it, but just more than average. And so you were in better shape and you wanted to, like most people, after a big meal, just want to go move around, get some movement in, enjoy the beautiful weather that you were experiencing in this lovely desert, and trying to push 55 pounds up a hill, and keep your nephew safe. uh, just really was strenuous on your lungs. And it was probably, would you say that was the worst kind of experience that you had with asthma leading up to that point?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
The
so,
other time being actually some years previous when I biked up that hill.
no, so this hill has been very
This
formative.
hill had been trying to tell me things for a long time, and I was just like, yeah, I know. I got to make my body smaller. I hear you, Hill. Yeah.
Mental models.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mental models.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so after you talked to your mom, talked to some doctors, you thought you just had exercise asthma with the albuterol, the inhaler that you had. It kind of helped, but not anything significant enough for you to like hunker down and say like, I'm doing this daily. But once you got really sick a few years ago with pneumonia, you realize that you have asthma. And since then, you've been able to realize and reframe and rewrite the mental models around how your body works. Primarily, that you have asthma and it's difficult to breathe, and that it's something that you're gonna have to manage the rest of your life. But it sounds like you have some really good providers and a really good plan to um, make it so it's not, it doesn't, how do I put this? It still impacts your life daily, but it's not debilitating. Like it's
Yeah.
not,
It's
yeah,
manageable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, and now you know that it's not because you're fat, it's because you literally have a metabolic condition to where it is harder for you to breathe. So whether you were skinny and met the diet culture expectations, or if you were not, you're still gonna have it.
Your lungs don't really care what size you are. If it's harder for them to breathe, it's hard for them to breathe.
Imagine that.
Hmm.
Imagine that. Well, how do you feel about this now? Like I know you said that it felt manageable and everything else, but how is
Yeah.
how is it? Yeah, just tell me where your headspace is at now.
Honestly, it makes me so glad that I figured it out because I mean, like, there's definitely moments where, like I said, when my dad was like, "Your uncles have it," or like when I told my mom after my asthma episode on this hill, and she was like, "Oh, what sounds like you have asthma?" And I was like, "I have this my whole life, you know."
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely frustration and like disappointment that you experience where you're like with parents when you're just like, "I wish you would have like noticed or addressed this because this
Yeah.
would have been it would have been nice to have started reframing a long time ago and or more than anything." Been able to breathe better my whole life.
Get more
Um,
oxygen? I mean, imagine that.
yeah, like
Like,
physical stuff would have been a lot more enjoyable to me for my whole life, which I was doing anyway, but I would have probably like enjoyed it better.
yeah.
Um, but like, so of course there's like a little bit of anger there and frustration, but like that resolved so quickly because honestly, just being able to breathe well, it's still like, what? Like, I can't tell you the number of times when I have been doing something and I'm like, remember when it would have been hard to breathe at this point and
Oh,
breathing? And like even like a couple years ago when our friend came for the eclipse and we went on that
yeah.
short little hike, even that short little hike, I was so tickled just going up that hill because it would have been complete it's like a completely manageable smallish little hike area.
Yeah.
And I would have been able to do it before, but just the fact that I was able to breathe so well and like have a conversation the whole time, because
Yes.
thing too, especially when you're talking about like when you're thinking about working out and one of the things people tell you is you'll know you're at like moderate intensity when you can have conversations, but it's kind of hard to. And I
Mhm.
remember I was part of why I thought I was so out of shape was because it was hard for me to have conversations, even again,
Yeah.
if my body felt okay. But
Yeah.
again, what do you have to do to have a conversation? Breathe. And so, like, even just the fact that I was able just to go on this nice little hike with a couple of friends and talk to them the whole time
Yeah,
without having to like, because I also tell you what, it's understandable, but also embarrassing for your to be aware that your friends are worried about you because you're breathing so hard. And especially where they also live in diet culture, so they're not thinking of you as a bad person because of your size, but they're also probably very concerned that the breathing is because you're out of shape, but I wasn't.
yeah,
And so it's just again where I was like, you're not gonna have to call someone to like airlift me off this hill. I promise you I'm fine. It's just hard for me to breathe, but I my body feels okay.
yeah,
So yeah, like I just at this more than anything
yeah.
like the amount of happiness I feel on a day-to-day basis,
Oh,
especially when I get to have that moment of like, I can breathe while I'm doing this, I'm breathing. Oh my gosh, I'm breathing. And it feels so great that it's like more joy than anything else.
oh, that's awesome. I've been thinking about that a lot this week, what you said of how there's like a general rule that when you're exercising, you can gauge like the level of intensity based on if you can hold a conversation or not. And I've been
Mhm.
thinking about all of the general rules that we as a society have about like the 10,000 steps a day, or even just in terms of like, it doesn't even have to be about health and like body, it could just be about productivity.
Mhm.
And how much like it kind of negates, like it would be, it's so easy, and I fall into this trap too. It's so easy just to say, hey, because this is the general, this is the general rule, this is the general standard, or this is the general test to determine X, Y, and Z. If you don't fit into that standard, it's so easy to think something's wrong with you.
Mhm.
Or to create stories that um like it has nothing to do with what's actually going on. Like it doesn't resolve the issue. And so it just kind of like perpetuates this belief that like maybe I am broken, or maybe there is something wrong with me, but not in like a productive way, like not in a curious way of like, wow, I wonder why, I wonder why this is different for me. And then it's more of like, oh shit, another reason.
Another mark against me and
Yeah.
constantly about why I'm like not worthy of love or how
Yeah.
I'm a problem or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm a burden. That's my big one, is like I'm just a burden. That's another reason. But yeah,
Mhm.
it makes me so grateful. And it does feel, and I'm so glad that it was like a sense of like relief for you of like I have like an understanding about how my body works, and I have an understanding about why all of those experiences were so difficult. And now I have like the care and the just the knowledge that you need to feel like you can do anything, that you're more unstoppable, which is great.
Thanks. I think so.
Yeah. Well, Casey, when is the next time? Well, you hike all the time with your pups. So when are you gonna go up? When's your next hike? When's your next big hill adventure?
I don't have something planned, but honestly, as you said that, I realized like I really do. It's usually just all of a sudden we're like, I want to hike, and then we just go. So I don't have anything planned, but it's not, I live in an area with lots of mountains. I live in southern Arizona now, so I have ample opportunities to hike. So now it's just a matter of like picking one and going for
Yeah,
it.
that's awesome. And now's the time to do it, like you said,
Yeah.
like
The
so
weather's
beautiful.
it's been a chillier week, so
That's
we're
awesome.
it'll be back in kind of more mild temperatures again. So
Yeah.
we'll be back in that like primo 70-degree zone for hiking.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you can fully enjoy it now, and it's not something that's keeping you back.
Not something that's setting my lungs on fire and making me feel like there's something wrong with me. No.
When I was like, were your calves on fire? Like I literally was like,
Yeah.
your lungs probably felt so bad that it didn't even like register like any other
I
part
could not
of
tell
your
you how
body.
anything else in my body was feeling. All I could tell you
Yeah.
was that where my lungs had been, there was currently a wildfire.
Just
Mhm.
raging.
Raging wildfire. The rest of my body could have been a blob for all I know, just floating along. All I knew was that there's
Yeah.
pure fire in my lungs.
Yeah. Well, people, listeners, go get your lungs checked. If you,
If any of these experiences resonate with you, talk to your healthcare provider. You might have asthma.
yeah, please go get yourself checked out. Oh, well, Casey, as always, love the story. Thanks
Thanks.
for sharing.
Lovely talking to you.
Yes, and we'll see you next time, listeners.
Sounds good. See you.
Bye.